All right, so this is Chapter 1, Lesson 5, Compare and Order Fractions, Decimals, and Percents. So as the title of this lesson states, we're going to be comparing and ordering things that are fractions, decimals, and percents. So the combination of all of them. All right, so this first box here says the blank, 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 or blank is the least common multiple of the denominators of two or more fractions. So in those blanks, you're going to write least common denominator, or LCD. Okay, so least common denominator, also called the LCD, is the least common multiple of the denominators of two or more fractions. All right. So when we're comparing and ordering fractions, the first thing we need to do is we need to follow these steps. There's 3 steps. So first is find the least common denominator. Okay, so that's step 1. So we have to find the LCD. Step 2 is we write an equivalent fraction for each fraction using the LCD. And then step 3 is compare the numerators. So let's look at some examples. The first example I have is we're comparing 5/8 to 7/12. Okay, so let's look at some examples. The first example that I have is comparing 5/8 to 7/12. Now, according to our steps, our first step is to find a common denominator. So a common denominator for 8 and 12 is going to be 24, as we can see over here. So the LCM of the denominators 8 and 12 is 24. So the LCD is 24. We're going to write an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 24 for each fraction. So basically I have to ask myself, what times 8 gives me 24? Well, 8 times 3 gives me 24. Whatever I do to my denominator, I also have to do to the numerator. So 5 times 3 gives me 15. I do the same thing for my other fraction, 7/12. 12 times what gave me 24? That was 2. So 7 times 2 is 14. Now my third step was to compare my numerators. My new numerators are 15 and 14. If I look at them, which one's bigger, 15 or 14? Right, 15's bigger. So that means 5/8 is the bigger fraction. So it's a greater than symbol. Okay, you may want to think about it as an alligator mouth. Remember, the alligator wants to eat the bigger number, wants a better snack. All right, so let's look at example number 2. Okay, example number 2 gets a little bit more complicated only because there's more fractions, right? So I'm going to do the exact same thing though. I'm ordering the fractions 1/2, 9/14, 3/4, and 5/7 from least to greatest. So first I rewrite each fraction using the LCD. In this case, the LCD, or least common denominator, is 28. So I rewrite each one with a denominator of 28. 1/2 becomes 14/28 because I multiply it by 14. 9/14 becomes 18/28 because I multiply it by 2. 3/4 becomes 21/28 because I multiply it by 7. And 5/7 becomes 20/28 because I multiply it by 4. So then I can compare my numerators. Which one of these numerators is the smallest? 14/28. So 14 is the smallest, so that one goes first. Then I have 18, 20, and 21. So then when I rewrite my answer from least to greatest, my first fraction was 1/2, 18/28 was 9/14, 20/28 was 5/7, and 21/28 was 3/4. Now there are 4 try it problems on this page. I want you to pause the video, Go ahead, try out the try it problems, and once you're done, we'll go over them together. All right, now that you've tried the try it problems on your own, let's go over them together. So A, I have 2/3 and 4/9. So they do not have a common denominator, right? 3 and 9 are not the same, so I have to come up with a common denominator. Well, I know 3 times 3 gives me 9, so my LCD is 9. So I'm going to change 2/3 so it has a denominator of 9. Well, in order to get 3 to 9, I had to multiply by 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. 4/9 I don't have to change because 9 is already there, right? So I look at my numerators, 6 and 4. 6 is bigger than 4, so 2/3 is bigger than 4/9. Letter B. Letter B says 5/12 and 7/8. So common denominator for 12 and 8 is going to be 24. Twelve times 2 gave me 24. So 5 times 2 gives me 10. And 7/8, 8 times 3 gives me 24. So 7 times 3 is 21. Between 21 and 10, 21 is bigger. So 5/12 is smaller than or less than 7/8. Letter C says 1/6 and 5/18. So my LCD is 18. 6 times 3 gives me 18. So 1 times 3 gives me 3. 5/18 already has 18 as a common denominator. So 3 and 5, 5 is bigger. So 1/6 is less than 5/18. Letter D asks us to order 1/2, 5/6, 2/3, and 3/5 from least to greatest. So my common denominator here is going to be 30. Okay, so I'm going to order each one of these fractions, so I'm going to change them. So 1/2. I had to multiply this by 15, so 1 times 15 gives me 15. For 5/6, I had to multiply by 5, so I get 25 over 30. For 2/3, I had to multiply by 10, so 2 times 10 is 20. And then for 3/5, I had to multiply by 6, so 6 times 3 gives me 18. Okay, now in the problem it told me from least, which is the smallest, to greatest, which is the biggest. So looking at these, the smallest one out of my numerators is going to be the 15/30. Okay, then it's going to be 18/30, then 20/30, then 25/30. Okay, so when I write them in the original form that they gave me, 15/30 was 1/2, so 1/2. Then the 18/30 was 3/5. The 20/30 was 2/3. and the 25th 30th was 5/6. So I have 1/2, 3/5, 2/3, and 5/6. All right, the second half of this lesson is comparing all three, fractions, decimals, and percents, okay? So it may be easier to compare fractions, decimals, and percents when they're all written as decimals, okay? That way you don't have to deal with fractions and you don't have to deal with the percent sign. So you can change them all to decimals, okay? So they've given you a couple examples, 1/5, 0.2. Remember, you can get decimals, go from fractions to decimals by dividing. So 1/5, 1 divided by 5 is 0.2, okay? And so on and so forth. Those are just some helpful ones that you should know, okay? So let's look at example number 3. Example number 3 says fill in each circle with less than, greater than, or equal to make a true statement. So if we're looking at this, I have 3/4 and I'm comparing it to 0.7, okay? 3/4 becomes 0.75 because I want to change them all to decimals. And I have 0.75 and 0.70, which I can add a 0 on. This is called annexing. Annex a 0. Basically, I'm adding a 0 on to the end. It doesn't change the value. It just is a placeholder, okay? Now I can look at 0.75 and compare it to 0.70. Well, which one's bigger? 75 or 70? 75 is bigger, so it's a greater than sign. Okay? Example number 4 says Lucita made 85% of her free throws. Henry made 7/8 of his free throws. Who has the better average? Explain. So I want to change both of these to percentages. 85% becomes 0.850 and 7/8 becomes 0.875. I annexed a 0 on this side so that I would have the same number of digits, right? So which one's bigger? 850 or 875? 875 is bigger, right? So it's going to be a less than symbol. All right, there are 6 try it problems on this page, so go ahead, try them out. Once you are done, unpause the video and we will go over the answers together. Now that you've tried the try it problems on your own, let's look at them together. The first one I have is 2/3 and 0.6. So I want to change 2/3 to a decimal. Well, 2/3 is a repeating decimal, and it repeats 0.66 forever, right? And then I'm comparing it to 0.6. I can annex a 0 on this side. So which is bigger, 66 or 60? 66. So 2/3 is greater than 0.6 or 6/10. Okay? Letter F says 0.7 and 8/11. So I'm comparing 0.7 and 8/11 is 0.72 repeating. I'm going to annex a 0. So which one is bigger, 70 or 72? 72 is bigger, so it's a less than sign. 1/5 for G and 0.2. 1/5 is 0.2 and 0.2. These are the same. I don't have to annex a 0, but they're the same, so I'm going to have an equal sign. Okay. Letter H is 42% and 0.44. Well, 42% becomes 0.42, and I'm comparing it to 0.44. 42 and 44, which one's bigger? 44. So it's less than. 7% and 7/10. This becomes 0.07, and 7/10 becomes 0.7. I'm going to annex a 0. So I have 7 compared to 70. 70 is bigger. So it's a less than sign. Okay. And then letter J, 6.5 compared to 650 percent. 6.5, 650% becomes 6.5. Well, these are equal to one another. And that ends lesson 5.